Welcome to the weekly worship service of the First Church in Boston, a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Back Bay. First Church offers this broadcast each Sunday morning from 11 a.m. to noon here on 88.9 WERS. The Reverend Edmund Robinson is minister at First Church. His sermon for today is titled Democranxiety.
Welcome to the First Church in Boston's worship service. Can everybody hear me out there? Yes. No? Could we have a little bit more volume on the microphone, please? This 22nd day of May, 2022, I'm Edmund Robinson, the interim minister, continuing the worship tradition of this church, which dates back almost 400 years. We are the oldest church in Boston, with the newest building. Our Paul Rudolph designed sanctuary in Boston's Back Bay is now open for live worship after being closed for 6 weeks in the winter due to COVID. We also welcome those joining us live streaming on Facebook and those who are joining on WERS FM 88.9, the radio station of Emerson College. We hope those joining off the premises will find the time to visit us in person some Sunday in the future when we can meet you. Come on down. We're close to the green line and the red line. If you come down and enter this magnificent space, you will understand what I mean when I say it is not only the oldest church in Boston, not only the newest church in Boston, but beyond a doubt, the grooviest church in Boston. Today after service, we will have the annual meeting of the church, and so the sermon will offer a few reflections on democracy. We'll start out with a well-known quote from Theodore Parker, a 19th century Unitarian minister, abolitionist, and transcendentalist. His idea of democracy was incorporated into the Gettysburg Address. Quote, "By democracy, I mean the government over all the people, by all the people, and for the sake of all. This is not the democracy of the parties, but is that ideal government, the reign of righteousness, the kingdom of justice, which all noble hearts long for and labor to produce, the ideal whereunto mankind slowly draws near. Here's the American program of political principles. All men are endowed by their Creator with certain natural rights. Those rights can be alienated only by the possessor thereof. In respect thereto, all men are equal. But the means to that end, the Constitution itself, is by no means unitary. It is a provisional compromise between the ideal political principle of the Declaration and the actual selfishness of the people, North and South." The words of Theodore Parker from the 19th century. Our opening hymn is number 360, "Here We Have Gathered." Please rise as you are able, and please sing with masks on.
Thank
I'm James Quixote McConnell, your announcer and broadcast engineer. The music director at First Church is Gigi Mitchell-Valesco, and the audio-video technician is Craig Hildreth. The prelude for today was Sicilienne by Maria Teresia von Paradisand, and the organ postlude will be Sonata de Primo Tono by Jose Lindon.
No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others. Thank you. And the affirmation at First Church Boston, please rise as you're able, and we say it in unison. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated. Well, it isn't quite hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk outside, so I think we dodged the real heat bullet, but we're going to we're going to use both of them. 2 microphones. That's the belt and braces approach to public speaking. What was my announcement? Oh, the announcement is, of course, that we have the order. After the service is completed, we will adjourn to the chapel, air-conditioned chapel, just to get you all up there, and we will then disperse for lunch around the building and come back together in the chapel and have the annual meeting and exercise our democratic principles. Also tomorrow, the small group ministry will be happening at 5 o'clock on Zoom. If you want to get on, see me at coffee hour, and I'll be glad to give you the Zoom link. Our responsive reading. We have a team from the worship committee.
Our responsive reading is number 443 in your gray hymnal. We arrive out of many singular rooms. We arrive out of many singular rooms, walking over the branching streets. We come to be assured that brothers and sisters surround us to restore their images on our eyes. We enlarge our voices in common, speaking and singing. We try again that solitude found in the midst of those who with us seek their hidden reckonings. Our eyes reclaim the remembered faces, their voices stir the surrounding air. The warmth of their hands assures us, and the gladness of our spoken names. This is the reason of cities, of homes, of assemblies in the houses of worship. It is good to be with one another.
The anthem for today is Send Forth Thy Light by Mili Balakirev. Our broadcast is brought to you from the Ken Orton Memorial Studio in honor of the original radio voice of First Church.
The presentation listed in your order of service will happen at the end of the service. I apologize for not telling you that before. Thank you, choir. That was lovely. Now I'd like to invite you to come into time of meditation and prayer. A little reflection on what the freedom of religion means to each of us. Holy One of Mysteries, we gather here under the spirit of religious freedom, while religion means a different thing to each one of us. Let religion be to us life and joy. Let it be a voice of renewing challenge to the best we have and may be. Let it be a call to generous action. Let religion be to us a dissatisfaction with things that are, which bids us serve more eagerly the true and right. Let it be the sorrow that opens for us the way of sympathy, understanding, and service to suffering humanity. Let religion be to us the wonder and lure of that which is only partly known and understood. An eye that glories in nature's majesty and beauty, and our heart that rejoices in deeds of kindness and of courage. Let religion be to us security and serenity because of its truth and beauty, and because of the enduring worth and power of the loyalties which it engenders. Let it be to us hope and purpose, and a discovering of opportunities to express our best through daily tasks. Religion uniting us with all that is admirable in human beings everywhere, holding before our eyes a prospect of the better life for humankind, which each may help to make actual. Amen. Our reading for the sermon today is from the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 by John Adams. A declaration of the rights of the inhabitants of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Article 1. All men are born free and equal and have certain natural, essential, and unalienable rights, among which may be reckoned the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, that of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, in fine, that of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. Article 2, it is the right as well as the duty of all men in society, publicly and at stated seasons, to worship the Supreme Being, the great Creator and Preserver of the universe, and no subject shall be hurt, molested, or restrained in his person, liberty, or estate for worshiping God in the manner and season most agreeable to the dictates of his own conscience, or for his religious profession of sentiments, provided he doth not disturb the public peace or obstruct others in their religious worship. Article 3, as the happiness of a people and the good order and preservation of civil government essentially depend upon piety, religion, and morality. And as these cannot be generally diffused through a community but by the institution of the public worship of God and of public institutions in piety, religion, and morality, therefore to promote their happiness and to secure the good order and preservation of the government, the people of this Commonwealth have a right to invest their legislature with power to authorize and require, and the legislature shall, from time to time, authorize and require, the several towns, parishes, precincts, and other bodies politic or religious societies to make suitable provision at their own expense for the institution of the public worship of God and for the support and maintenance of public Protestant teachers of piety, religion, and morality in all cases where such provision shall not be made voluntarily. And all monies paid by the subject to the support of public worship and of public teachers aforesaid shall, if he require it, be uniformly applied to the support of the public teacher or teachers of his own religious sect or denomination, provided there be any, on whose instructions he attends. Otherwise, it may be paid toward the support of the teacher or teachers of the parish or precinct in which the said monies are raised. And every denomination of Christians, demeaning themselves peaceably and as good subjects of the Commonwealth, shall be equally under the protection of the law, and no subordination of any sect or denomination to another shall ever be established by law. Article 4, the people of this Commonwealth have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state, and do and forever hereafter shall exercise and enjoy every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not or may not hereafter be by them expressly delegated to the United States of America in Congress assembled. Our sermon hymn is number 1, the first hymn in the hymn book. Louis Untermeyer wrote the words, "May nothing evil cross this door." I think it's appropriate for our annual meeting.
You are listening to the Sunday worship service of First Church in Boston, Unitarian Universalist on WERS.
If you look just after the preface in your gray hymn book, you'll find the UU principles and purposes, our statement of 7 values which we hold dear. By principle number 5 of this series, we covenant to affirm and promote, quote, the right of conscience and the use of democratic processes within our congregation and in society at large, end quote. Think about that for a second. 2 things are lifted up in that principle: the right of the individual conscience and the use of democratic processes. The right of private individual conscience had been a hallmark of New England Congregationalism for many years. It granted to each person, particularly clergy persons, the right to come to his or her own conclusions about ultimate matters, such as whether there was a God or life after death or purpose in the universe. It is fundamentally a value of liberty and also had a lot to say about epistemology, how we know anything at all. If you have a right of conscience to believe anything you determine to be true, and a right of free expression to discuss your belief with others, you approach the liberal ideal that truth is found in dialogue and debate. The other half of the fifth principle is the use of democratic processes, and this has two branches: in society at large and in our congregations. Historically, those two branches grow from a common root, and nowhere should that be more evident than in Massachusetts, and specifically in Boston, and specifically at First Church. But it starts before First Church was founded in 1630. It starts with the Plymouth Bay Colony, the Pilgrims. The Pilgrims arrived in Cape Cod in 1620, but they realized that the charter they had from the British Crown was for a settlement in what is now New York, but was then considered part of Virginia at the mouth of the Hudson River. When the Mayflower had first seen land, what is now Eastham on Cape Cod, they turned south trying to get to the Hudson, but they almost foundered on the shoals called the Pollock Rip in Nantucket Sound, so they could not reach their destination safely. They turned around and decided to settle in Massachusetts, but what to do about the charter? They drew one up for themselves, and that's where we get the Mayflower Compact, the first instrument of self-government in the New World. No one told those colonists that it was okay to create your own government just by the consent of the people. They just did it. 10 years later, the masked Bay colonists who arrived with the Arbella fleet had the foresight to bring their royal charter with them so they could settle where conditions were best rather than where the charter had said. And when they had found an appropriate site for settlement, they could set about drafting a charter for this church before the charter for the town. Because if you could create a colony just by drawing up a document, you could create a church the same way, without seeking permission from the crown or the archbishop or the pope or any authority in England or elsewhere. What ties political democracy to congregational polity is that both rest on the consent of the people. As John Locke later opined, the basis of society is agreement, the social contract. Our ancestors on these shores were putting these ideas into practice before Locke wrote them up philosophically. The reason I call this sermon Democranxiety is that people today seem in a sweat about the continued vitality of the democratic project, which goes back to the settlement of Boston and the 18th century Enlightenment. We look around today and can see models throughout the world of governments which do not rest on the consent of the people, governments where the news is carefully controlled and policy is based not on what happened, but on what direction the ruling powers want the country to go in. Such governments are not kept in power by the consent of the people, but by the fear deliberately spread by the government as a means of staying in power. Russia is typical, but not alone. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is only the latest in these assaults on democracy. The Russian-controlled news media assert that the purpose of the military operation is to root out Nazis in the present Ukrainian government. This despite the fact that Ukraine's president is Jewish. Before this latest invasion, the Russians had seized Crimea in 2014, a seizure which the rest of the world considers illegal. But the only way to hold Russia accountable, short of all-out warfare, is to impose sanctions. And the sanctions will inevitably hurt many participants in the Russian economy who don't personally agree with the actions the government has taken. And Russia, of course, is not the only place where democracy is under threat. In Europe, authoritarian governments have come to power in Hungary and Poland, and right-wing parties are growing in France. One of the interesting byproducts of Vladimir Putin's adventure in Ukraine is that it is harder for conservatives in Central and Western Europe to continue to embrace him. But it's not just Europe. Turkey, India, the Philippines, Brazil, Uganda, Rwanda, all are under authoritarian rule to one degree or another. Democracy is under threat here in the United States. The hallmark of American democracy has always been the peaceful transfer of power when the voters elect a new government. That tradition came to a crashing end in 2020, when the incumbent, who had lost by a substantial number of votes, not only refused to accept the reality of his loss, but is still, 18 months later, actively sponsoring candidates to run for office in primaries dedicated to the lie that he won the election in 2020. He is trying to unseat the secretaries of state in Arizona and Georgia because they accurately reported his losing vote totals. And then there was the insurrection of January 6th. It's hard to see that as a peaceful exercise of the right to protest the government, when there were coordinated attempts to muscle the vice president into shirking his constitutional duties, and innocent people were hurt, and innocent people died. We will never be able to say again that a peaceful transfer of power is the hallmark of American democracy. At the beginning of this sermon, I read from the world's oldest constitution in continuous use, the 1780 Constitution of Massachusetts, authored by the greatest legal mind of his era, later to be the second president of the United States, and the first of 4 Unitarians who have held that office, John Adams. The section I read had to do with basic rights. Adams lifted some phrases from Jefferson's Declaration of Independence from 4 years before. But where Jefferson wrote that the natural and inalienable rights of human beings were the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Adams wrote that the natural rights included, quote, the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, that of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, in fine, that of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness, unquote. Happiness was still in there in a general way, but it got kind of demoted below the acquiring, possessing, and protecting property. Both Adams and Jefferson were working from the same source. John Locke, a century before, had articulated the theory of inalienable natural rights, and he expressed it as the rights to life, liberty, and property. Property, as Locke used it, was more than real estate or personal items which could be bought or sold. It also meant close to what we would now call a right to privacy, a liberty of personal conscience, a zone of concerns which government should not be allowed to invade. I don't know why Jefferson changed Locke's property to pursuit of happiness, and Adams left it in and elaborated on it. But I suspect that Adams, with his urban Boston experience, was more acutely aware than Jefferson of the anxiety that wealthy people would have over the prospect of a revolution. In any society that had existed at this point in time, there were a lot more poor people than there were wealthy. And if every person had a vote, the poor could always outvote the rich and use the power of the state to confiscate rich people's property. So I suspect that Adams was trying to offer some subtle reassurance that in the Massachusetts regime that they were now forming, the acquisition and protection of property would be granted a high value along with those other inalienable rights. Adams, as I said, was a Unitarian, and he and Abigail are buried in the crypt of United First Parish in Quincy, along with John Quincy Adams and his wife, and whose emeritus minister sits among us even today. In Adams's day, the system set up by the Puritans, called the Standing Order, still prevailed. Those congregational churches were tax-supported, but by the time Adams wrote, there were many other denominations in evidence, and his draft for the Constitution allowed an individual citizen who was not of the congregational persuasion to direct his tax money to support his own Episcopal or Baptist minister. Many people familiar with the U.S. Bill of Rights think that when the First Amendment came into effect at the national level in 1789, and it said Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, That meant there would be no more government-supported churches. But that's not true. It meant there would be no churches sponsored by the federal government. But states such as Massachusetts were free to continue their tax subsidies to churches, which they did until the mid-1830s. Now, a church is not primarily a secular institution, as would be a bank or a grocery store or a pawn shop. It's primarily a spiritual institution, a place for people to gather to worship according to the dictates of their consciences. But it typically has a building, and that building has a location and takes up real estate. There is a property aspect to churches. How were they paid for? Originally, they were set up with what you might call community funds. In old Massachusetts, you could not have a town until you had three things: 10 property owners in the area who were willing to tithe 1/10 of their property for the building of a meeting house. 2, the meeting house itself, usually raised with community effort. And 3, a learned pastor. Only when you had the people, the building, and the pastor could you apply to the great and general court for a charter as a town. After the American Revolution, as people settled in New England who were not Congregationalists, the notion of Lutherans or Methodists paying to support congregational pastors felt more and more unfair. So a political battle ensued, with the Congregationalists and the Unitarians allied to preserve publicly funded worship, and the Methodists, Quakers, Universalists, and everyone else opposed. Maybe some of you in your childhood learned this long word: anti-disestablishmentarianism. This described the Unitarian and Congregational position. The other denominations were trying to disestablish these established churches. But when public taxpayer money ran out, some churches resorted to assessments to fund the operations. Each family would buy a pew or pay rent on one. This was a system apparently still in place in this church in the 1920s. For it was in 1922 that the church was reorganized, and all the pews and all the other property of the church were deeded to a new group of 5 people who were to hold the property in trust for the rest of the church. We have celebrated the 50th anniversary of this building. We could, if we choose, celebrate the 100th anniversary of the new financial order in First Church. Is there something worth celebrating? Recall that our 5th principle commits us to the use of democratic processes in our congregations as well as society at large. We have a split governance, which is typical of older UU churches. A governing board with staggered terms, 1/3 elected every year and 1/3 rotating off. And then this other group which holds all the purse strings, which is not elected by the members of the church at all, but which is selected by the group itself as people retire from it. In some older churches, such a board is called the deacons, and they serve for life. I bring this up not to criticize the trustees who are here with us. My experience has been they are some of the most dedicated and caring volunteers in the church, and they certainly work hard. But it is not democratic, as was apparent this year, when the parsonage, one of the most substantial assets of the congregation, was sold on the sole initiative of the trustees without any input required from the membership or the standing committee. This was perfectly permissible under the rules, as I understand them, and the trustees did keep the standing committee and membership apprised. But in these days of financial uncertainty, one can imagine a simple provision requiring congregational approval by a certain percentage vote if an asset were to be sold over a certain threshold value. And my role as interim minister is to hold up a mirror and let you see what I'm seeing of the church, and then you can decide whether you want to do anything differently. The holding of all assets of the church by a small, self-perpetuating group, no matter how charming and good-hearted and wise they be, is not as democratic as one can imagine. They could stand for election at annual meetings. Their decision could be overridden by the democratically elected standing committee. There could be a provision that a special meeting of membership could reverse the trustees' decision. All of these are messy solutions. And that tells you one thing about the democratic processes. They frequently involve more levels of complication than do the non-democratic processes. I once spent a summer on Beacon Hill living in the Beacon Hill Friends House. And when they had house meetings once a week, they would run them by Quaker rules. And we didn't leave until we had talked our way to a consensus on every issue before us, no matter how small. Fortunately, we will not have to achieve consensus in the meeting we're about to attend. There's an honorable tradition called voting, and voting often decides issues both momentous and trifling. I will suggest that you might look at the processes we use in the annual meeting in light of the fifth principle and see whether we should have more democracy or less on particular things we do. I contrast the current sale of the parsonage to the demands made 50 years ago after the previous church burned to the ground. The fire of 1968 left two congregations at a crossroads, for the second church had decided to re-merge with the first church and seek a common fate together. Rhys Williams' memoir of that time, called Trial by Fire, recounts how an outside UU group called the Fellowship for Renewal came forward to press its demand that First and Second Church dissolve itself as a church and give away the money it had raised for low-income housing in the neighborhood. I described in my sermon on the anniversary what happened next. The important thing about what happened is that it involved the whole church. Everyone who was a member was asked for his or her opinion about what the church should do. And there was only one family who thought we ought to devote to neighborhood housing the entire sum of money raised for reconstruction. In a sense, this was redundancy, since the trustees owned the physical assets of the church and the money which had been raised. But the entire membership was canvassed on this existential question. And as I said in the anniversary sermon, time has vindicated that decision, because the church both rebuilt a new sanctuary and raised enough money to launch Hale House, a program for neighborhood seniors which is still going strong today. A bit more democracy than was strictly called for at that time allowed the right decision to be made. But let's pull the camera back for a look around the big picture before I close. The reason I'm preaching on democracy is because it's the day of the annual meeting, and because that's one of the lenses through which we can look at ourselves here in this very old and very new church. There are many other yardsticks by which we could measure what we're doing here. We could consider efficiency, which is in some respects almost the opposite of democracy. We could consider how much empathy we show. We could consider what we're doing to make the neighborhood or the city or the world better. We could ask how well we are living our UU values, including democracy. I call the sermon Democranxiety because it does make me anxious, and I bet it makes some of you. But the worries I have about democracy are not the ones tied up with this church. The worries I have about democracy is that democracy ties my fate to the vote of people that think that I'm trying to replace them with immigrants, people of color, women. As I read about the Buffalo shooting, it reminded me of the Charleston racist shooting at Mother Emanuel a few years ago. Yes, these were murders and also hate crimes, and there's a perpetrator in each case who is locked up. But there's a big, wide internet out there, and it is full of people who think like this, and I have one voice, and I have one vote, and I have a voice, but I don't think my vote can cancel out all the replacement theory nuts, and I don't know what I can say to keep that wildfire from spreading. Just after Winston Churchill had won the Second World War, the voters of Great Britain turned him out of office. So perhaps he was a little embittered when he said, quote, "Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried." For all the anxiety of the present moment, I think I'd stick with democracy or even try to get it a little more democratic. Amen. Now we will have the offering passing among you.
And now your offertory Asturiana from Siete Canticones by Manuel de Falla featuring William Thorpe, baritone. If you'd like to support the work of this church with a financial donation, you may write out a check to First Church Boston and mail it to 66 Marlborough Street, 02116. You can also donate via text. Simply text the dollar amount, 5, 10, 20, etc., to 617-917-5610. You will receive confirmation by email. Thank you.
To see if it might console me, I drew near the green pine tree. To see me weep, it wept, and the pine, since it was green, wept to see me weeping.
chalice with the words in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. Those we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing hymn is number 354, We Laugh, We Cry. May we always keep in mind the differences among us and the things we have in common. Let us defend the faith of our forebears so that the government of all the people, by all the people, and for all the people shall continue to be our guide. Amen. Please be seated for the postlude, and something's coming up afterwards.
Please feel free to join us live each Sunday at 66 Marlborough Street at the corner of Berkeley Street and Back Bay. If you'd like more information about programs, services, or membership at First Church, please visit the website www.firstchurchboston.org or send an email to office@firstchurchboston.org. I'm James Quixote McConnell, your announcer, alongside Craig Hildreth as a broadcast engineer. Thank you so much for listening. We'll now return you to the studios of WERS.
Okay, Fern, I think you're up. They tell me just as much as I need to know about the traditions of this church. I was advised a week ago about this award that the minister usually sort of honchos it through, so I did the best I could with a lot of assistance from Juliana and Fern, and now Fern, I think, basically has taken the bull by the horns and will present the award.
Thank you, Edmund. Hi, everyone. I'd like you to wait with your applause, your really exciting applause till we finish and Carol gets the bowl. And Carol, do you want to just come up here now? And then Ellie will come. Then Ellie will come and speak to her experience of working with Carolyn. Here we are. All right. The Reese Williams Award, of course, many of you know, is the highest honor that First Church bestows on a congregant. The congregants to date, since the celebration of the first evening event in 2004, have displayed extraordinary leadership that reflect our Unitarian values, and those congregants demonstrate their gifts for all of us to experience within the rhythm of the life of our beloved church. Carolyn Henderson and her husband Phil walked into First Church and never left about 10 years ago. She had the experience that many of us have walking in for that first time, feeling she had her spiritual home. She has modeled the best form of leadership, always acknowledging everyone else's work, and is aware when others have fallen short, taking on those responsibilities and using her leadership skills to backfill those tasks if others cannot complete it. Carolyn's professional career, which none of you know about, has been in education. In the 60s, she taught in Kenya, East Africa, where Phil, her husband, designed and built a hospital. Her second career has been building new U.S.-China school partnerships throughout the U.S. and China, with the hope that these educational bridges will be an investment in a more peaceful global future. And now for Ellie to come up and share their experiences and many of yours with Carolyn.
Well, some of you who don't know Carolyn well might be asking yourselves why she's receiving this award. In fact, Carolyn herself this morning was asking me, why did she receive this award? So let me give you a list of why. She's been the music committee co-chair for endless years. Well, at least 10. 5 with Nigel Harvey and 5 with Larry Bell. She's supported the work of 3 different music directors here and managed the many, many, many complexities of hiring 2 of our latest exceptional music directors, Robert August and Gigi Mitchell-Velasco. She's been a steadfast volunteer for the campaign against gun violence, faithfully working on publicizing our annual vigils. And during the pandemic, though there were many people of some importance working on this problem, Carolyn was the glue that held the broadcast committee together. How incredibly meticulous she is in running meetings, and we want to acknowledge this and her commitment to do her very best on everything she's involved with. Her tireless energy, her kindness, and her thoughtfulness. Congratulations, Carolyn.
So Carolyn would like to share with you a few words back. Then I'm going to have Ellie come up, give me the box. I'm going to give it to Carolyn, and you can clap again if you wish. All right, so here you are. Take it away.
Well, I certainly never expected to be here receiving any recognition at all, so this is a total surprise. When Phil and I walked in the door here at First Church and heard the organ and heard the choir, and interesting sermons and friendly people, we said, we think we can be here. Music has always been for me a means of experiencing the spiritual and expressing the spiritual. I've always been a part of choirs and orchestras and whatever, one of the music kids all my life. And so it was just a natural thing for me to volunteer to be part of the music committee. And I've been happily a part of that. I just want to take this opportunity, because I've been online for much of the last year, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the standing committee, the committees over the last several years, and this congregation for supporting the music program at First Church. Clearly, it's an important an important element of the worship here in this church. And we are all delighted that Gigi Mitchell-Velasco has come to First Church. And she, with literally her right-hand man, Noel, provided this multi-talented musician, has brought an extraordinary quality and very interesting variety of music to First Church to enrich our services, and we're very grateful for that. And as for our choir, well, we have voices that have been with us for quite a while and new voices, and you just sound terrific. Just produces goosebump producing vibes when you sing, especially a cappella. Love it. Thank you. Well, the 50th anniversary event was way over the top, so much appreciation for that too. And I'm grateful for Ellie Miller and Bob Winkley for agreeing to co-chair the music committee at this time, and as I step back. I did love, thank you. You're not hearing me? Okay. Wait, okay. I did love working with my previous co-chairs, Nigel Harvey, such an interesting character. I mean, a physicist, a black belt, a sailor, a photographer, and in his retirement became a composer, and he left us several wonderful pieces of music. And then Larry Bell, well, he's our terrific composer and pianist and still working with us. We're grateful for that. And I thought it was great fun to work with previous music director, Paul Sinoa. He just had this quirky sense of humor with the choir that they absolutely loved. He was a harpsichordist, also, of course, terrific on the organ and piano and as a conductor, a real musician. And then when he had to leave for a full-time job in Florida, we were able to bring Robert August on board, who was a phenomenal organist and a wonderful musician as well. Then we lost him, and thank you, Gigi, for coming. Right? So if you're looking for a niche in this church if you're a music lover and looking for a niche, you just might want to think about the music committee. I recommend it. It's full of very interesting people. I have loved being a part of this church, and I'm grateful for the recognition, and I'm so happy to be part of you, and just thank you. Thank you for it all.
All right, she can open it.
Thank you. And I'm supposed to open it?
You are allowed to open it, of course. It is yours from us.
Set it down so
All right, there you go.
anything on fire.
All right. You came to us a tireless advocate for music, for worship, and enhanced the experience for us all within First Church, Boston. It is an honor to give you the Reverend Reese Williams Award. Pretty cool.
Thank you. I will treasure.
And now, as I understand it, we are collecting. Photo op, okay.
Do you want us together? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Stage posterity, right?
Yep.
And thank you.
All right, so as I understand it, if you want to pick up your packet, is on the back table for the annual meeting. We're going to adjourn to the chapel where we will receive a few instructions and then disperse for lunch and reassemble for the meeting. Thank you.
The worship service for First